Kyle Arden had always been a man who valued one thing above all else: peace. In a galaxy bursting with conflict, greed, and endless noise, Kyle longed for a place where he could breathe without interruption, a place where no one could reach him unless he allowed it. For years he had scoured interstellar auctions, buying and selling ships, technology, and even land on distant worlds. But this time he wanted something different, something permanent. When the auction terminal blinked the words, "Planet Orcs 9 uninhabited," Kyle's heart skipped a beat. Uninhabited. Free. Alone. He did not hesitate. With a final bid, he became the owner of a small rocky planet on the edge of known space, far from trade routes and interstellar politics. Most would have seen a barren rock, barely able to sustain life. Kale saw a sanctuary. The journey to Orcs 9 was long. He navigated through asteroid fields, dodged wandering comets, and traversed the dark stretches of void where stars seemed like pinpricks of light in endless black. His ship, the Lumenis, was small but reliable, filled with the supplies he would need for months of solitude. Kale had calculated everything: oxygen, water, power, and food. There were no surprises in his life, not anymore. When the planet first came into view, Kale felt a thrill he hadn't experienced in years. From orbit, it looked like a barren gem, brown and gray with scattered green patches hinting at life hidden beneath rocky surfaces. He lowered the landing gear, touched the surface, and stepped out into a silence so profound it pressed against his ears. The air was thin but breathable. The temperature was moderate. For the first time in decades, Kale felt free. He surveyed the landscape. Jagged cliffs lined the horizon, and strange, twisted trees stood like lonely sentinels on the plains. Small rivers carved silver paths through the valleys. There were no signs of civilization, no buildings, no roads, no satellites. Only the quiet whispers of wind through rocks and the distant call of creatures he could not see. He smiled. This was perfect. Kale's first days were dedicated to survival. He had brought prefabricated modules to assemble his home, energy cells for power, and seeds to grow his own food. The work was methodical, satisfying in its simplicity. Every nail hammered and every panel secured brought a strange sense of fulfillment. In the evenings, he would sit outside, watching two suns dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Alone, yes, but alive in a way he had not been for years. Despite his joy, Kale could not shake a faint feeling of being watched. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia. The human mind, he told himself, was wired to feel presence even in the quietest moments. But then there were footprints in the soft soil, too large to be human yet too irregular to belong to any known animal. Small shelters, abandoned but recent, lay scattered near the rivers, and sometimes when the wind carried the right sound he could hear whispers, barely audible, almost like laughter. Kale did not panic. Instead, he took notes, scanned the terrain, and adjusted his routines. He set up perimeter sensors and traps, not lethal, just enough to alert him if anything approached. He cataloged plants, tracked animal movements, and mapped every cave and valley he explored. The planet was alive more than he had expected, and Kyle's curiosity, once dormant, sparked with renewed energy. On the seventh day, Kyle ventured farther than usual. He climbed a jagged ridge overlooking a deep canyon. From this vantage point, he saw the full expanse of the land. The rivers glinted in sunlight, winding through forests and plains. And then he saw them, shadows moving at the edge of a distant forest. He froze. The shadows were humanoid in shape, tall and agile, moving with purpose. Kale's mind raced. Others here? How is this possible? He had read the reports. Orcs 9 was uninhabited. There should have been no life capable of intelligent thought. And yet, there they were, their movements deliberate, their bodies blending with the trees like predators in camouflage. Kale did not approach. He retreated quietly, heart pounding, mind sharp. For the first time since leaving civilization, he felt the old thrill of fear mixed with excitement. The planet was not empty. It was hiding secrets. Over the next few days, Kale observed from a distance. The figures moved mostly at dawn and dusk, hunting, gathering, and disappearing before he could get closer. Their speed and coordination suggested intelligence and training. Kale theorized they were a nomadic tribe, possibly the remnants of a species long thought extinct. Yet there was something else, something different. They paused whenever they sensed him, their heads tilting as if trying to study him. Cale found himself both alarmed and fascinated. He had wanted solitude, but perhaps deep down he had also desired the challenge of discovery. Humans thrived on challenges, on understanding what seemed impossible. These mysterious beings were a puzzle, and Cale Arden loved puzzles. One evening, Cale was setting up solar panels near the northern cliffs when he heard the whisper clearly for the first time. A voice, soft yet sharp, carried on the wind. Finally, he froze, scanning the area, but saw nothing. The voice repeated, closer this time. A male. Cale's mind whirled. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and intrigue. Who were these creatures? Why had they been searching for him, or any male, perhaps? He had expected danger, but not fascination. He had expected solitude, but not curiosity from another species. That night he could not sleep. He stayed awake, examining the stars and thinking through strategies. If these beings were intelligent, Cale knew confrontation could be deadly. He also knew that humans had survived against far stronger opponents through cleverness, planning, and understanding. If I want to remain alive and alone, I must learn more about them first. Cale began tracking their movements with more precision, noting patterns in their hunting, resting, and social interactions. He observed that they avoided certain areas, particularly near cliffs and rivers where Cale had set up observation posts. He began leaving subtle messages, markers that might communicate his presence without direct contact. If they see I am cautious but non-threatening, perhaps they will hesitate to attack immediately. Days turned into a week, and Cale's solitude became a tense vigilance. Every crack of a branch, every shadow moving in the periphery of his vision became a puzzle piece. He found himself strategizing in ways he hadn't in years, not for profit or politics, but for survival. The thrill of being hunted, of being watched, ignited something primal within him. He realized that humans, in their core, thrived on unpredictability, on adapting to challenges that seemed impossible. One morning, Cale discovered one of their hunting grounds. They had left evidence, discarded tools, torn cloth, and faint tracks. It was a sign that they were not only intelligent but resourceful. Cale studied the patterns of their movements, deducing their routines and habits. He noted their strengths, speed, coordination, senses far sharper than his own, and their potential weaknesses, predictability, reliance on coordination, and perhaps overconfidence in their own instincts. Cale knew that if he wanted to survive, he could not rely on strength alone. He had to think, plan, and use his environment. He began setting traps, not to harm but to warn. He created signals to alert him of nearby movement. He reinforced his shelter, built hiding places, and stocked caches of supplies in case he needed to flee. Every action was deliberate, every plan a reflection of human adaptability. As he worked, Cale could not help but wonder, why did they call him male? Were they searching for humans specifically? Or was there something unique about his presence that drew them? The question lingered in his mind, unanswered but tantalizing. It was a mystery he was determined to unravel. By the end of the second week, Cale had established a fragile routine. He maintained his solitude while observing the Huntresses from a distance. He recorded their patterns, noting changes and deviations. Every encounter, even indirect, sharpened his understanding. He realized that humans, though physically weaker, could survive and even thrive through ingenuity, patience, and courage. For the first time in his life, Cale felt truly alive, not just existing, but aware, alert, and connected to the planet in ways he had never imagined. Arcs 9 was no longer just a haven, it was a living puzzle, a test of human wit against a world that was far from empty, and somewhere in the forests, hidden by shadows, the mysterious Huntresses continued to watch, waiting for the right moment to make their presence fully known. Cale smiled to himself as he watched the sun set once more. He was alone, yes, but not lonely. And in the depths of the unknown, he felt a thrill he had long thought lost. The exhilaration of discovery, the challenge of survival, and the undeniable proof that humans, when faced with the impossible, could shine in ways no one anticipated. Cale Arden had settled into a rhythm. Each day he would explore the planet, monitor the mysterious Huntresses, and refine his shelter and defenses. The planet, which had seemed barren from orbit, was alive in ways he had never expected. Strange plants grew in hidden valleys. Alien creatures scuttled in the forests, and the wind carried whispers of life he could barely understand. Yet Kale had grown confident in his ability to navigate this wild place. He was human and humans adapted. That had always been enough. But then one morning everything changed. Kale was harvesting water from a small stream near the edge of a forest when he noticed movement. At first it was subtle, a shadow flitting between trees, but soon he realized it was not an animal. His scanners picked up multiple heat signatures, more than he had ever recorded before. He froze. The Huntresses had approached, and this time there was no hiding. They emerged slowly from the tree line, their bodies agile and strong, moving with a grace that suggested both speed and caution. Kale had seen them from a distance before, but now they were close enough that he could notice details. Their golden eyes gleamed in the sunlight. Their skin had a faint luminescent glow, and their bodies were lean, muscular, and honed for survival. Each carried a weapon, crafted from materials he did not recognize, yet their posture suggested discipline rather than recklessness. Kyle did not panic. Instead, he crouched behind a large rock, analyzing their movements. Humans survived because they thought faster than stronger opponents. He needed a plan, not a confrontation. The Huntresses paused at the edge of the clearing. They seemed to be communicating silently, moving their heads and hands in ways Kale could not fully understand. Then, one stepped forward, a tall figure whose presence seemed to dominate the group. She spoke softly in a language Kale could not comprehend, but one word was repeated and it sent a shiver down his spine. Male. Kyle realized this was why they had been searching. They were not merely predators, they had been searching for him, for a male human. But why, and why now after all this time? He needed to act carefully. Any sudden movement could provoke them. Kale remembered a rule from his survival manuals. Observation first, reaction second. Slowly he raised his hands, not in surrender but in a neutral gesture. He hoped to communicate that he meant no immediate threat. The Huntresses reacted instantly, shifting into cautious stances, eyes narrowing. They did not advance, but neither did they retreat. Kale noticed small gestures, a tilt of the head, a subtle click of the fingers. They were assessing him, trying to understand what he was. Humans were rare here, and perhaps he represented something important to them. Kale spoke in a calm voice, testing the sound. I am Kale, I mean no harm. The Huntresses exchanged quick movements, almost like a conversation without words. The tall one stepped forward again, lowering her weapon slightly. Her gaze was intense, studying him as if trying to measure his strength, his mind, and his intentions all at once. Kyle could feel the intelligence behind her eyes. This was not a mindless predator. It was a creature capable of strategy and thought. Days passed, and Kale kept his distance, observing the Huntresses from afar. He learned their patterns. They hunted at dawn and dusk, rested in hidden shelters during the heat of the day, and communicated in complex ways. Kale noted their strengths, speed, agility, and keen senses, but also observed that they relied heavily on coordination. When separated, they seemed less confident. Kale realized he could use this to his advantage. Humans survived not because they were the strongest, but because they could anticipate, adapt, and innovate. He began preparing subtle signs of his presence, leaving non-threatening signals near his shelter, hoping to communicate his awareness without provoking aggression. Then came the moment Kale had been both dreading and expecting. He was gathering plants near the stream when a shadow fell across him. He looked up to see the tallest huntress standing only a few feet away. Her golden eyes studied him unblinking, and Kale felt a rush of adrenaline. She spoke, and this time he caught more words, though the language was still largely foreign. One word repeated. Finally. Kale understood enough to know she had been searching for him, or at least for someone like him. He stayed still, slowly nodding. Finally, she had found me.
And yet, what did she want?
For the next few days, Kale tried cautious communication. He left small gifts, purified water, edible plants, and simple tools. He noted their reactions. They were curious but careful. They observed everything, taking in his movements and choices. Kale realized that this was as much a test for him as it was for them. One evening, Kale sat on a ridge watching the twin suns set. The Huntresses had camped near the forest edge, visible only as silhouettes. He understood that they were not attacking yet. Perhaps they were waiting, or perhaps they were assessing whether he was worth the effort of engagement. Kale reflected on humanity's strengths. Humans had survived against overwhelming odds not because of brute force, but because of intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. He could see now that the Huntresses, powerful and trained, had not anticipated a human male capable of thinking so strategically. This gave him a strange sense of confidence, but he could not be careless. Even the most intelligent plan could fail if he underestimated their instincts. Kyle began to reinforce his shelter, creating hidden exits, camouflaging entrances, and setting up non-lethal traps that would alert him to intruders. Every move was deliberate, every action a reflection of human ingenuity in the face of superior physical ability. Then one night, something unexpected happened. The Huntresses approached his shelter, not aggressively but with curiosity. Kale observed from within, his heart racing. They circled his home, touching surfaces, examining his tools and pausing frequently to communicate with each other. Kyle realized that this was an opportunity. If he could establish trust or at least mutual understanding, he might coexist with them, at least temporarily. He emerged slowly, hands visible, carrying a small tray of water and food. The tallest huntress stepped forward, her gaze fixed on him. Kale spoke softly, repeating his earlier words. "I mean no harm. I am Kale. I can share this planet with you peacefully." The huntress studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out, accepting the water. A silent gesture of cautious trust. Kale exhaled quietly, realizing that this was the first step toward communication. Over the next week, Kale and the Huntresses engaged in a delicate dance of understanding. He learned to anticipate their movements, offer gestures of cooperation, and observe without provoking fear. In turn, they seemed fascinated by him not just as prey, but as a being unlike any they had encountered before. Kale noticed subtle behaviors that suggested intelligence and culture, the way they organized their camps, the tools they used, and the careful strategies they employed while hunting. He marveled at their capabilities but also noted their reliance on group coordination. This was a key insight. Humans could exploit patterns, adapt quickly, and act unpredictably, advantages even against the most skilled predators. One afternoon, Kale ventured further than before, following a stream that led to a hidden valley. The Huntresses appeared behind him, moving silently but deliberately. Kale did not flee. Instead, he stopped, turning slowly to face them. The tallest huntress spoke again, her voice carrying the same word. Finally, Kyle understood. They had been searching for him, or for one like him, for a long time. But now that they had found him, their instincts were mixed. Curiosity, caution, and perhaps admiration. Kyle smiled, realizing something profound. This planet, which he had purchased to live alone, was teaching him the most valuable lesson about humanity. Survival depended not just on strength, but on intelligence, adaptability, and understanding. He was not alone, not really. The Huntresses had forced him to become sharper, quicker, and more aware than he had ever been. As the suns dipped below the horizon, Kale felt a thrill he had not known in years. The Huntresses might be dangerous and he might be their target, but he was human. And humans, when faced with the unknown, could shine in ways that even the strongest adversaries did not expect. Kyle Arden, the solitary human who had bought an empty planet to live alone, realized that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet predict. The Huntresses had arrived and the game had begun. Kale Arden had learned an important lesson on Arcs 9. Strength alone could not guarantee survival. The Huntresses were fast, skilled, and intelligent, but they were also curious. They were observing him just as closely as he observed them. Every movement, every choice he made was a message, a test, and an opportunity. By now, Kale had established a careful routine. He would leave food near the forest edge, allow them to approach but never touch his shelter, and signal that he posed no immediate threat. The Huntresses responded cautiously, taking the gifts, examining his markers, and retreating. It was a silent exchange of understanding, a fragile truce built on observation, patience, and subtle communication. Kale realized that this truce was temporary. The Huntresses were not passive. They were hunters, born to seek and conquer. Yet unlike anything he had imagined, they were not attacking him outright. Their fascination with him, their repeated words, "finally," a male, suggested a purpose beyond simple survival. Perhaps they were seeking knowledge, companionship, or something unique about humans that they had never encountered. Kale decided it was time to take a careful step forward. He approached them, hands visible, holding a small tray of food and water. His voice was calm and deliberate. "I can share this planet. We can survive together." The tallest huntress stepped forward first. Her eyes, sharp and golden, examined him as if weighing his words. She sniffed the air, tested his intentions with her senses, and finally, after a long pause, accepted the offering. Her acceptance was silent but significant. The first real sign that communication, if not trust, was possible. Over the next several days, Kale began observing them more closely, trying to understand their society. He noticed patterns in their behavior. They hunted in coordinated teams, rested in shared shelters, and communicated with subtle gestures and sounds. There was a hierarchy, clearly, with the tallest huntress leading decisions. Kyle realized that understanding their structure could give him an advantage, not to dominate but to survive and coexist. One afternoon, while exploring a hidden valley, Kyle noticed something troubling. Tracks of another alien species, larger and more dangerous than the Huntresses, had appeared near the rivers and cliffs. The intruders were not just wandering, they were hunting. Kale's mind raced. If these hunters discovered the Huntresses or him, the planet could turn into a battlefield. Kale knew he had to act. Alone, he could not confront these intruders directly. He needed allies. That meant building trust with the Huntresses, showing them that humans could be more than prey. They could be partners in survival. That night, Kyle approached their camp cautiously, leaving markers to indicate he wanted to speak. The tallest huntress emerged first, followed by the others, weapons at the ready but lowered slightly. Kale gestured toward the tracks, then to the horizon, trying to convey the danger. His gestures were careful, deliberate. To his surprise, the Huntresses responded with curiosity rather than aggression. They mimicked his gestures, clicked softly to communicate, and seemed to understand the concept of threat. Kale realized that intelligence, not strength, was the bridge between them. Over the next few days, Kale worked on small cooperative tasks. He showed them how to extract fresh water from hidden springs using simple tools. He demonstrated ways to trap small animals for food without harming the ecosystem. He even repaired a damaged shelter, earning cautious admiration. The Huntresses observed closely, sometimes imitating his movements, sometimes testing his reactions. Kale began to notice subtle changes in their behavior. They no longer approached with the same rigid caution. They lingered near him longer, studied his methods, and even left small gifts in return. Strange fruits, tools crafted from stone and metal, and sometimes just a protective presence nearby while he worked. It was a delicate dance of trust, and Kale was learning the rhythm. One evening, Kale sat with the tallest huntress on a ridge overlooking the valley. He could see the twin suns setting, casting long shadows across the terrain. He tried to communicate a simple idea: cooperation. Survival was easier when minds worked together, not just bodies. The huntress tilted her head, considering him. Slowly, she mimicked his gesture, pointing to the horizon, then to herself, then back to him. It was a form of agreement, a tentative acknowledgement that he was no longer just an outsider, but a potential ally. The partnership was fragile, but it worked. Kale learned the Huntresses' hunting patterns, their signals, and even their limits. In turn, he taught them strategies they had not considered, ways to use terrain to their advantage, how to anticipate movements, and even methods to conserve energy during long hunts. It was a strange collaboration, one born out of necessity, but it was real. However, Kale's sense of peace was short-lived. The tracks of the larger alien hunters continued to appear, closer and more frequent. He realized that the planet was not just a safe haven, it was a target. The intruders were powerful, intelligent, and relentless. Alone, neither Kale nor the Huntresses could withstand them. Together, however, they might stand a chance. Kale began planning. Using his knowledge of the terrain, he mapped potential ambush points, natural barriers, and escape routes. He constructed traps not lethal but effective for slowing down or confusing intruders. He showed the Huntresses how to use the environment to their advantage, teaching them to blend, hide, and strike in ways they had not considered. It was during these exercises that Kale realized something profound. Humans were not the strongest species, nor the fastest, nor the most instinctive hunters. Yet through observation, planning, and ingenuity, Humans could turn even the most dangerous situations to their favor. This was why the Huntresses had been fascinated by him, not because of his physical presence, but because of his mind. The turning point came one night when the intruders arrived. Their approach was silent but unmistakable. Massive shapes moving through the valley, eyes glowing in the dim light. Kale signaled the Huntresses, pointing to the positions he had prepared. Together they moved with precision, using the terrain, traps, and distractions he had set. The intruders were powerful, but Kale's strategy worked. They were slowed, confused, and disoriented. The Huntresses, following his cues, struck with precision, using the environment to their advantage. Kale watched in awe and satisfaction as intelligence overcame brute force. The intruders were forced to retreat, leaving the valley in relative safety. After the battle, Kale and the Huntresses gathered near a stream, exhausted but unharmed. For the first time, the tallest Huntress approached him closely, their eyes meeting. It was a gesture of respect, acknowledgement, and perhaps even admiration. Kale realized that the dynamic had shifted. He was no longer just a human trying to survive. He was a strategist, a partner, and a symbol of what humans could achieve when faced with impossible odds. In the following days, Kyle continued to build trust. He and the Huntresses explored the planet together, shared knowledge, and reinforced their shelter. He learned more about their culture, their loyalty to each other, their skills, and their instincts. In turn, he taught them human methods of problem-solving, showing them that brains could complement brawn. Yet Kale knew this alliance was delicate. Any misstep could trigger instinctive aggression. He had to balance caution with initiative, patience with action. The Huntresses were powerful, but they were also curious, capable of learning, and surprisingly adaptable. Kale realized that humans, when combined with observation and strategy, could become unpredictable forces that even superior physical beings could not easily counter. One evening, as the twin suns set, Kale sat with the Huntresses on a cliff overlooking their valley. They had shared food, exchanged gestures, and moved together as a team. For the first time, Kale felt a sense of belonging, not because he had abandoned his desire for solitude, but because he had found a form of partnership that respected both his independence and the Huntress's nature. Kale understood that humans thrived not because of dominance, but because of adaptability, creativity, and the ability to inspire trust. He smiled, realizing that this planet, which he had purchased for solitude, had instead become a classroom, a proving ground, and a place where his humanity could shine. The Huntresses watched him, silent but alert. Kale knew that the next challenge would come, not from the planet itself, nor from him, nor from the Huntresses, but from external forces. Somewhere out in the galaxy, others would come, attracted by the same resources, skills, or opportunities. He had to prepare, but now he had allies, strategies, and the confidence that humans could survive, even thrive, against threats far stronger than themselves. Kale leaned back, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. The Huntresses gathered around, not threatening him, but sharing the space. It was a fragile peace, a delicate balance of trust and instinct, but it was real. And Kale knew deep in his bones that humans, with all their creativity, ingenuity, and courage, could shine in ways no one anticipated. Arcs 9 was no longer empty. It was alive, challenging, and full of opportunity. And Kale Arden, the human male, had begun to prove that even against superior strength, intelligence, and strategy could turn the tide. Kale Arden had learned much in the weeks since the Huntresses had appeared. He had discovered their patterns, their strengths, and their weaknesses. He had also discovered something remarkable about himself. Humans were not simply fragile or ordinary. Humans were adaptable, inventive, and capable of outthinking even the most skilled predators. The planet that had once promised solitude had become a proving ground, and Kale had begun to master it. But tranquility is rarely permanent, even on a remote planet. One evening, while Kale and the Huntresses were reinforcing their shared shelters, distant tremors shook the ground. At first, Kale thought it was an earthquake, but the patterns of the vibrations were too deliberate. His sensors picked up multiple large heat signatures moving toward them across the valleys. Kale's heart raced. These were no ordinary predators. They were organized, massive, and clearly intelligent. "This is it," Kale muttered to himself. "The real test." He signaled the Huntresses, who immediately recognized the threat. They had seen intruders before, but this group was different. Larger, faster, and equipped with weapons that radiated power Kale had not encountered. These aliens were hunters but also warriors, coming for domination rather than mere survival. Kale understood the stakes. If they were not stopped, both he and the Huntresses would be overwhelmed. Kale quickly took stock. His strategy relied not on brute force but on human ingenuity. He had mapped the terrain, observed patterns of movement, and created traps designed to delay, confuse, and divide opponents. The Huntresses were skilled and loyal, but even they could not match the sheer numbers and strength of the intruders. Humans had a weapon beyond physicality: creativity. "Listen carefully," Kale said, pointing to positions on the ridge. "We split into 3 groups. I'll lead the ambush on the left. You cover the cliffs and forest edge. Use the traps. Stay coordinated." The Huntresses nodded. Their trust in him had grown, cautious but real. They spread into positions, silent as shadows, waiting for Kale's signal. Kale exhaled, adjusting his improvised communication devices. Using a combination of sound, light reflections, and subtle gestures, he coordinated the team. The intruders moved forward, unaware of the human mind guiding the defense. Kale smiled grimly. Humans had always survived by turning disadvantages into opportunities. Today would be no different. As the intruders reached the valley, Kale triggered the first trap, a series of pitfalls covered by natural debris. Several intruders fell, thrashing and roaring, delayed but not defeated. The Huntresses struck from the shadows, using precision and agility to incapacitate enemies without risking themselves. Kyle observed, adapting his strategy as the situation evolved. One of the intruders broke through a barrier near the river, charging toward the shelter. Kale met it head-on, using a combination of quick thinking and environmental advantage. He lured it toward a narrow gorge, where a hidden boulder trap crushed its path, forcing the creature to retreat. The Huntresses followed, striking decisively at exposed intruders. Hours passed in a tense, chaotic dance. The intruders were relentless, but Kale's strategy turned their strength against them. He directed movements, anticipated attacks, and exploited weaknesses in ways even the Huntresses had not considered. They began to rely on him not only for guidance but for the subtle intelligence that tipped the balance. By the time the twin suns began to rise, the intruders had been forced into retreat. They had underestimated human ingenuity, underestimating the value of observation, planning, and adaptability. Kale Arden, a human male, had turned the tide of battle against opponents far stronger and faster than himself. The Huntresses gathered around him, eyes wide with admiration. The tallest stepped forward, her gaze meeting Kyle's. For the first time, words were unnecessary. Their trust, respect, and perhaps even awe were clear. He had proven that humans were not fragile or weak. They could lead, inspire, and outthink even the most formidable opponents. Kale looked around the valley, surveying the aftermath. The shelters were mostly intact, the traps had worked perfectly, and the intruders had been repelled without unnecessary bloodshed. He realized something profound. Humans had a unique strength, not measured in power or speed, but in mind and strategy. Over the next few days, Kale worked with the Huntresses to rebuild and strengthen their defenses. He improved their shelters, created more intricate warning systems, and trained them to anticipate threats in ways they had never considered. In turn, the Huntresses taught Kale new methods of survival: silent movement, precise strikes, and ways to read the land that only a native hunter could understand. The planet was no longer a place of solitude, it was a partnership. Kale had found not only allies but students and teachers. The Huntresses respected his intellect, and he respected their instincts and strength. Together, they were stronger than any one of them could be alone. Kale began exploring the planet more boldly, knowing he had support and security. He discovered hidden valleys, rare plants, and underground water sources. The Huntresses followed him, curious and attentive, learning from his strategies while sharing their own insights. Kale realized that the combination of human ingenuity and huntress skill created a synergy neither could achieve alone. One afternoon, as they rested near a cliff overlooking a sparkling river, Kale reflected on the journey. He had come to Orcs 9 seeking solitude, a life free from responsibility or danger. Instead, he had found a challenge, companions, and an opportunity to demonstrate the strength of humanity. Humans were not the fastest, the strongest, or the deadliest species in the galaxy, but they had something unique: creativity, adaptability, and the ability to inspire trust and cooperation across species. The Huntresses watched him, silent but attentive. Kale realized that they were no longer driven solely by hunger or instinct. They had learned to rely on him, respect him, and perhaps even admire him. The human male, once alone and fragile, had become a vital force on the planet. Weeks passed. Kale and the Huntresses continued to strengthen their partnership, preparing for any future threats. They explored, hunted, and built together, creating a community built not on dominance but on collaboration. Kale marveled at the balance they had achieved. Humans and Huntresses, different in every way, yet capable of working together toward a common goal. Then, one evening, Kale received a signal from his long-range scanners. A ship was approaching from deep space, large and heavily armed. He knew immediately that this was not an exploration vessel. It was a threat, drawn by energy signatures and planetary activity. The Huntresses sensed it as well, their bodies tense and alert. Kale did not panic. Instead, he began planning, using everything he had learned. He mapped potential ambush points, coordinated with the Huntresses, and created strategies that relied on observation, misdirection, and the planet's natural features. He was human, and humans thrived on challenges. The ship landed, and a team of heavily armed aliens emerged. They moved with confidence, expecting an easy conquest. But Kale had anticipated every move. Traps slowed them, illusions misled them, and the combined skills of humans and Huntresses forced them into confusion. Kale directed the Huntresses with precision, using both gestures and simple devices to communicate in real time. By the time the invaders realized the situation, it was too late. They had underestimated the human mind, the power of cooperation, and the ability to adapt under pressure. The battle ended swiftly with the invaders retreating, leaving the planet under the control of Kale and his allies. Kale stood on the cliff, watching the horizon. The Huntresses gathered around him, silent but present. He realized that Arx-9 was no longer just a planet he had bought for solitude. It was a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. It was proof that even in a galaxy of stronger, faster, and more dangerous species, humans could survive and thrive by thinking, planning, and inspiring trust. The tallest Huntress approached him, her eyes bright with understanding. Kale smiled. They did not need words. The bond they had forged, the respect and trust they had built was clear. Humans were not perfect, but they were remarkable. And now, even on a distant, once empty planet, Kale had shown that humanity could shine. As night fell, Kale sat with the Huntresses under the stars. The twin suns had set, leaving a sky filled with distant galaxies and sparkling stars. He realized that he was no longer alone, yet he had found what he truly sought: purpose, challenge, and proof that humans, when faced with the impossible, could rise above. The planet was alive. The Huntresses were loyal and skilled, and Kale Arden, the human male, had proven that solitude was not the same as weakness. Humans could adapt, think, and survive against all odds. And on Arx-9, for the first time in years, Kale felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had not only survived, but thrived, proving that humanity, in all its creativity and ingenuity, could shine brighter than anyone expected. The planet was no longer empty, and neither was Kale's life.